Figurative language in tall tales. Let's first start by reviewing what figurative language is. Figurative language describes something through the use of unusual comparisons to make things clearer. So remember, figurative language has two different meanings. It has a literal meaning, which is exactly what it says, and then it has its figurative meaning, which is what the author is. It's like a creative way that the author is trying to say something. The results of using this technique is the creation of interesting images in our minds, which is imagery. One of the most important elements of tall tales is exaggeration. Do you remember what's another word for exaggeration? It's a type of figurative language. Hyperbole. Figurative language helps writers incorporate exaggeration. So not only will you see figurative language when you're reading, you can also use it in your writing to become a more interesting writer, a better writer, all that good jazz. Two kinds of figurative language that we are going to focus on this slide are metaphor and simile. So a metaphor is comparing two unlike things by saying one thing is the other. For example, my sister's a baby doll. So my sister is a baby doll. You might say, compares your sister's size and sweetness to that of the perfection of a doll. Another time you might say, my brother is a rat. This compares your brother to the nastiest little creature you can think of. In both cases, you will be making a metaphor. And then we have a simile where we're comparing two unlike things by using like or as. If you say, my sister is like a doll, or maybe my brother's as good as gold, you will be making a simile. On this slide, we're going to look at just a little snippet from two different tall tales, and we are going to identify whether they're using a simile or a metaphor. The first one is, even from his awkward position, he could see that she was extraordinarily tall as a hickory sapling with arms as big as a keelboat's tillers. So is that simile or metaphor? This is a simile, and we can tell because we have as big as. So we're comparing, let's see, her height, she was extraordinarily tall, to a tree, and her arms to a keelboat, tillers. And then down here we have, when Pecos Bill was a little baby, he was as tough as a pine knot. Is that a simile or a metaphor? That is a simile. We're saying that we're comparing his toughness to a pine knot by using the word as. What is the simile telling us? It's telling us that he was extremely tough. Now, the author could have said that in a different way. It could have just wrote, when Pecos Bill was little, he was extremely tough. That's pretty boring. If you add in similes, metaphors, and other type of figurative language, it makes the writing more interesting for the reader. Here we have, the night John Henry was born, the sky was as black as coal, thunder rolled through the heavens, and the earth trembled. Simile or metaphor? That one is a simile, as black as coal. So we're comparing the color of the sky to the color of coal. Here, he was a tiger running after his prey. Simile or metaphor? This one's a metaphor because it's saying that one thing is or was another. Next we have, his eyes were fireballs that burned holes and to his enemies. This one is also a metaphor. His eyes were fireballs. So notice that we didn't use the word is here or here because was is past tense for that verb is, and then were is past tense for the verb are. So whenever you're looking for a metaphor, it's going to say one thing is another, or these things are something else. And then the past tense will be was and were. So before we get into our tall tale that we will be looking for figurative language in, I want us to go over hyperboles again. That way we have a full understanding. Why? Because hyperboles occur a lot in tall tales. So hyperboles is an exaggeration. It allows you to express yourself. For example, this is the best thing that's ever been invented in the whole entire world. Super dramatic, right? Just like every form of figurative language, we have the literal meaning and then we have the figurative meaning. So instead of saying it was really funny, and a hyperbole would be, I nearly died laughing. You didn't literally die. You guys use hyperboles all the time. Whenever you hear something, you're like, I'm dead. Like, that's a hyperbole. Instead of saying, I am tired, a hyperbole could be, I am so tired that I could sleep forever. He can jump high. The hyperbole would be, he jumped so high, he touched the sky. I am hungry. The hyperbole would be, I'm so starving that I could eat a horse. And then she smiled big. Our hyperbole is her smile was so large it went around her head a couple times. And then we have the line was long. And instead, we could say the line of people waiting stretched a zillion miles. So notice how this could grab the reader's attention, make the writing way more interesting than the literal meaning. So the tall tale that we're going to read is called Pecos Bill. And we're going to try and identify some of those hyperboles and other figurative language. The story of Pecos Bill started when he was just a baby living with his family in East Texas. The family liked living far away from other people, so when neighbors moved in about 50 miles away, the family decided to move further west. They packed up their very large family. It's said that Bill had 15 or 16 brothers and sisters and started heading out. Bill was so young, he rode in the back of the wagon. The trip was going fine until they crossed the Pecos River in Texas. There was a big bump and Bill went tumbling out of the wagon. Bill was swept down the river and saved by Mother Coyote. The coyote adopted Bill and raised him as one of her own cubs. That's why Bill grew up thinking he was a coyote. He was really good at howling at the moon. In time, Bill grew up and met up with some cowboys. That's when he learned that he was a man, not a coyote. So he joined up with the cowboys. That's how we learned about his superhuman strength. So there's a text clue there. His superhuman strength. That lets us know that we're about to hear some hyperboles in this tall tale. He had many adventures in the Southwest. They say he invented the rope lasso and rode a mountain lion. He also tamed the wildest, fastest, and most beautiful horse in the world. Hyperbole. One story tells how he wanted to start a ranch of his own. Since most of the land in Texas already belonged to someone else, Bill went further west. That took him to New Mexico. Now he liked what he saw and decided to stake out the whole state for his ranch and fenced in Arizona for a calf pasture. Well, it was known that Bill was so strong that he could ride just about anything. So it was no surprise that when a big cyclone came roaring down out of Kansas, Bill decided to ride it. Hyperbole. It was a mighty big cyclone, but Bill jumped right on its back. The cyclone whipped this way and that way, trying to throw Bill off, but Bill stayed on. It knocked down forests and mountains as it tore through Texas. So this is the part of our tall tale that we are starting to see changes in our character. We're starting to see more of his abilities and definitely more hyperboles. The cyclone headed further west towards California, trying to shake Bill off. It worked so hard to get rid of Bill that it just rained itself out. It made so much water that it carved out the Grand Canyon. Now, that's how the Grand Canyon was made. So I've noticed, and I'm pretty sure you guys have noticed, that in a lot of these tall tales, it has a Western theme, especially with lassos and also creating different parts of the world, like the Grand Canyon or the Mississippi River. So it's like a story about how these things were created, but a fiction story. The cyclone was just about washed out by the time it reached California. There wasn't much of a storm left. That's where Bill finally fell off. They say he hit the ground so hard it sank below sea level. Folks today call that spot Death Valley, which we've read about before. Bill went on to have many more adventures, each bigger and more unbelievable than the one before. There are lots of stories about Pecos Bill, first told around the campfires of the American West. They have been passed down to us today. On the next slide, you are going to give me 3 hyperboles from this tall tale, Pecos Bill. And I will include this passage, that way you guys can go back and look for yourself and you can find your text evidence.